Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined, as always, by Wil Schroter, startups.com CEO, founder, and as we established in the last episode, my friend. And that's been true for a lot longer than I've been saying it on the podcast, just so everyone is well aware, Wil included.
BFF forever.
Speaking of amazingly great outcomes, Wil, big outcomes is one of these things we talk about a lot in the startup space, right? The whole unicorn concept, and I know we both have a lot of feels about all of that. If you go back in your history, man, like at what point, if ever, was not aiming big enough the problem? Like, did you ever it's like, gosh, if only I had tried for a bigger outcome, something better would have happened? Was that ever a problem?
It's actually the problem. App's a problem. If I look back, and in history is this great teacher, had I aimed for bigger outcomes, I would have missed almost every major opportunity that defined my life and career. I mean, think about the opposite way, right? After having done 9 companies, not all successfully, by the way, every time you get into something, you think it's a great idea, right? You think hopefully maybe it's a big idea. Although I would argue the I hope it's a big idea mentality is dangerous, and that's probably a lot of what we'll talk about here. It's that this concept of saying it's got to be big or it's nothing, or the idea isn't big enough, etc., is such a fundamentally broken approach that, and by the way, not driven by entrepreneurs. It's driven by investors, right? Like entrepreneurs just kind of backed into it over time. And where I think more and more founders end up missing the point is on kind of 2 vectors, Ryan. I think one is they say, well, if it's not big enough, I won't get the attention I need, ergo investors. And it's, again, you say, okay, is that really what you're after? You're after investment, not, building something. And then the second is, well, I'm not going to pursue it at all because it's not big enough. And in either case, I would argue, those are both broken fundamentals. It should be a good idea that has a real market that might become something big or change and morph, we'll talk about this, into something big. But just saying it has to be big to pursue it all, it just prevents you from making lots of good decisions. And so I think that's worth unpacking today.
That's interesting. So yes, so essentially the postulation there is that by setting the metric too far out of reach, by setting it so far into the future or so far beyond what you could possibly conceive in this given moment, that you're putting yourself into a dangerous spot, right? That you will make decisions counter to what would potentially be beneficial at this stage of the business by trying to hypothesize how big it could possibly be when you don't even know if it works small at this point, right?
Let's break this down in stages. I think that this isn't just about saying, is this a big company or not? It's about all of the decisions that we may make by saying it has to be big, that prevent us from actually being successful. And I think that's the core of this. It's not just saying big is bad. Big's not necessarily bad. Big is just an outcome on your path to growth, right? It'd be the equivalent of us saying, I want to field a baseball team, and we only hit home runs. It's like those home runs are awesome, but you sort of have to get on base, right? And so for all of us, getting on base is actually a win, right? So, for example, let's use 2 kind of 2 ideas with 2 potential outcomes, and we'll make them kind of generic, right? And I'm curious your thoughts here. Outcome A, let's say, is a $3 million business that makes, let's say, $500,000 in profit. I was going to say $1 million, but let's say $500,000. Each is a lot of money, right? But vastly not considered a big opportunity. Option B is a $100 million plus company making however much. I mean, at that level, it could be making anywhere from like $0 to $20 million, right?
Could be losing money, depending on how well funded you are.
Yeah. It's some huge outcome that could lead to some IPO or massive wealth event. Let's compare those 2, and let's start with probability. The probability of getting to a $3 million on 500K kind of exit, so to speak. When I say exit, I just mean like a milestone point at which you can say, yes, we've achieved something, versus $100 million. It's a bit of a straw man argument because it's obviously getting to $3 million versus $100 million is dramatically different. Not to mention, very few companies fundamentally could even get there. Like, not every idea can expand that much. Would you agree there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's some businesses that are going to cap out at a certain revenue level, either logistically or even just the market size. And there's nothing wrong with that, which is what we're talking about today.
Let's start with that, though. If what we're saying is I'm going to evaluate even getting started by what ideas fit under the option B scenario versus the option A scenario, here's a whole bunch of places where I think that breaks. First is you're assuming that the idea, before you've even done anything with it, is already the right idea. Meaning, like when we started startups.com, I had no idea what the company was actually going to be. We just knew that, right, that we just wanted to help entrepreneurs. And it would sort of kind of become something, hopefully, right? And it wound up becoming the company that it is today, and we're super proud of it. However, if we had dismissed the entire thing based on when we knew the least about where the idea could go, think of what a miss that would have been.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like you're talking about these massive outcomes and like these, we're aiming for $1 billion, or here's the opportunity. At the stage when you're still at the idea level, I mean, you're the cocktail napkin's still wet with the ink, right? Is kind of like talking about how you're going to negotiate your child's NFL contract based on theoretical combine scores that won't happen for at least 22 more years because the kid hasn't even been born yet, right? Like, it's ludicrous, and yet, this is what we do, right? How often do we hear this notion of like, well, look, the U.S. market for X is $72.6 billion. If we only get 2%, like, come on, man, like, can you sell the first customer, right? Let's not worry about the total size and potential of something that hasn't taken its first step yet.
If our idea around idea A or option A was we want to build the best real estate agency in Columbus, Ohio, right? And that's a business that could get to $3 million throwing off $500K, right? And option B is we want to fundamentally build a major level competitor, say Remax or one of the other major competitors, and it's going to have to be $1 billion company to do that, scale and what have you. You could look at both of those opportunities and you could start with one broken argument. You can start with one broken argument that says, well, it's going to take the same amount of time to build a small business versus a big business, so I might as well just build a big business. Such a consistently dumb argument.
Yep.
Yes, it takes the same amount of time, but that doesn't mean you're going to get to the same outcome.
That's right.
Right? It's so incredibly assumptive.
If we ignore a huge part of the math, which is the probability, then all things are equal, right? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why only giant companies get built, and only giant companies create good outcomes for entrepreneurs, right? Not even close.
Yes, it takes the same amount of effort to go to play college football as it does to eventually get drafted into the NFL, but it doesn't mean you're going to go to the NFL, right?
That's right.
Like, I don't understand where that argument came from, right?
I don't know.
When we're looking at those two opportunities, one of the first things we should be looking at is probability. What is my probability that I'm going to get to an outcome that I give a shit about? And let's unpack that part, Ryan, if you would. Everyone keeps thinking that there's this finality to this journey. In other words, I picked up opportunity A, which means it's a $3 million business. And I'm just, I guess, done. I guess when I hit $3 million, I just give up and I stop building my business. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
At startups.com, when we got to say $1 million of revenue, I was super psyched about it, right? I was, but I wasn't like, guess we're done.
Yeah.
I guess that's as big as the opportunity is. And so had I, or had we as a team, not me, had we given up, so to speak, at that point, you could maybe make the argument that we didn't pick a big enough idea. But if what we're going to be is the biggest realtor in Columbus, Ohio, and we actually hit that milestone, can't we just get bigger?
Yeah.
Can't we just expand the scope?
Hello, Cleveland. Well, maybe not Cleveland.
Yeah. Let's not go there. But listen, I think when we're evaluating our ideas, and then of course, kind of getting behind our ideas, one of the challenges that I consistently see with the founder thinking is that if it's a small business, that I'm somehow locked away to that outcome, right?
Yeah.
Let's back up, Ryan. Think about how many things you've worked on that may not have been like a runaway success, but fundamentally changed your life.
Yeah. Most of them.
Right. That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And so picture this. You're 22 years old. You have to think way back. And you're thinking about starting a business. And you say, I've got this business idea that can maybe generate $1 million. And you say, I don't want to do it because it doesn't sound big enough. My argument would be, dude, you're 22 years old.
Yeah.
If you get a business to $1 million within the next couple of years, you know how few people can ever do that?
I just ran into this on a Clarity call like a week and a half ago. This young team, two co-founders, one male, one female, and they were asking me, probing questions about what I felt about the market size. And we were going back and forth and looking at some comparable companies and so forth, and trying to back into some math. And we came up with something like around 8 or 9 million top line would be a good solid. And they were like, yeah, we just feel like this isn't worth 15 million or more. We're not sure we want to get involved with it. And I'm like, hang on a second, because they're both really young. I mean, I think he's like 22 or 3, and she's 24 or 5. And I was asking, I was like, so what do you think you'd be paying yourself at that rate? Like, what do you think you'd be putting in your pocket? What do you think would change financially for you? What are you making now, right? And they were like, they're making like, $55,000 a year now. I'm like, you're telling me an $8 million business wouldn't put you in a better financial position, that wouldn't be worth doing? That's, you're not going to pursue it because what? Like, where did you set the arbitrary bar on how big your Scrooge McDuck money vault is going to be at the end of this? Like, I just don't get it.
Well, here's why. Because often we go in with a broken set of parameters. And this is one of the most common things I see among entrepreneurs. We say, I need to have this huge outcome, right? Yeah, I need to make $10 million or $100 million. And the truth is, it's not like if you were set up to make that much money, that the only reason you didn't is because you set your sights too low, right? I don't know a single person that's made, and I know a lot of people that have made that much money. I don't know a single person that has made that much money that only made it because they refused to make any other amount of money, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Dude, if it were only that easy, right? If only you could just select what you wanted, and because you selected it, it happened.
Also, like, who doesn't end up getting the money, right? It's not like, oh, I said I was going to make 80 million on this business, I made 100 million, and so now this government body that doesn't exist is going to come and take that other 20 that I didn't declare I wanted to make away from me. It's no longer mine, right? You still get to keep it if you exceed your goals, no problem.
Right. Well, here's the thing, though. If I were starting from scratch and I were to say, okay, what are my progressive goals? See, this is where people get messed up. They say, my goal is I need to make $100 million and live off that. And here's the list of things that I can buy with that money. The math is so broken. What they're missing is that's not the way life works. You don't just set one goal and you kind of hang out until you hit that one goal. It's not at all the way it works. The way it works is you set a near-term goal. That is your next milestone. You optimize all of life to get to that milestone. And then if you are so rare and fortunate to get to that milestone, crazy idea, you set another one.
Wait a second. We get to pick more than once? This isn't like The Price is Right. I have to pick one door, and whatever prize is behind that door, that's the max of my winnings.
I got into this backward. I came into life with my expectations so ridiculously low that if I hit anything, like if I could feed myself, I thought I was making $1 billion, right? But inadvertently, by having such low expectations, it forced me to have very near-term milestones that I put all of my effort into hitting. And then lo and behold, when I hit those milestones, when I could actually eat, I wasn't like, oh, well, I can eat now. So I guess this, I guess we're all done here, right? I said, okay, well, if I've made it to that level, how do I get to the next level? But what I learned over time, and we certainly incorporated this into how we build our company, set a very achievable milestone, ambitious but achievable, and actually hit it. Again, I always use the diet analogy. It's the person that says, I want to lose 40 pounds. Who cares if you want to lose 40 pounds? Can you lose one?
Can you lose one? Yep. I love to quote my dad, and I've probably already said this in the podcast at least once, but his analogy for this was, it's fine to aim for the moon. He's like, but tell me how you're going to clear the fence. Make sure you clear the fence, right? It's all well and good to aim for the moon, but if you can't clear the fence, you're not getting to the moon. So, make sure that you're set up and structured in a way that you can achieve the short-term goals. Make sure that you have short-term goals, and make sure that you understand how those stack up into the long-term ones. And I think that's where most founders fall short. They have some idea of this, ephemeral prize that exists somewhere in a distant future, but they're not real clear on what the milestones that'll actually get them there are, nor are they willing to accept that even achieving those is a huge win in and of itself, right? That this isn't a zero-sum game at which the end, the winner takes all. There's a lot of winning and or losing, depending on how it comes out, along the way, right? It's a full-on journey with plenty to be enjoyed along the way, if you allow yourself to.
Actually, let me build on that for a minute, because what I really want to have folks understand is that if you can say, hey, in this business, we got it to $1 million, throws off $200,000 of revenue. Wasn't the runaway hit that people talk about. But let's talk about what it was. That business will allow us to go do something else if we choose. More importantly, to not have to do something else if we choose. I don't think people think about that whatsoever. It gave us the experience to understand how to get to that level, to understand how to get to more. And it gave us something, from a reputation and resume standpoint to build from. So if we want to go do another one, we've got some credibility to say that we even did it.
Right.
Here's what most likely happens. Most entrepreneurs who kind of do this poorly, they string together a long history of total misses, right? And they talk about how the next idea has to be bigger. It's like, if you never got to first base, why do you keep talking about home runs? Right, dude, just get to first base.
Bunt. Just bunt.
Yeah,
just advance somebody else on a base. Sacrifice yourself, for God's sake.
Well, there's a few things. So the first is, if I'm so fortunate, and I have to reference, this is about being fortunate, to get to a business that says it's at $1 million throwing off $200K. The reality is, if I can never get to $400K, $600K, $1 million, whatever your imaginary threshold is, so what? Right? Again, and I'm not being dismissive here. Like, I'm all about cash, but I'm also saying you can't undersell how important it is to hit one of those milestones. And for every entrepreneur that's out there that's you're looking at another entrepreneur saying, oh, it could be bigger, it could be better, whatever. Remember that at some of those thresholds, you're 90% optimized for what you need cash for anyway, right? Once you bought car, house, etc., there's not that much more that you need, that having made this horrible $200,000 decision is messing you up. I don't even know where people get this idea, like that there's some sort of limbo that entrepreneurs are stuck in because they didn't make enough money. I just don't yet to see that actually happen.
I can't think of a single example, right, where it's like, you've achieved, as you said, there's like some minimum bars that you cross, and like once you've hit those thresholds and you have the let's go beyond basics, right? So like it's you get the houses, the cars, you've got a stable business that's throwing off continuous cash for you, and you can continue to go to that well. What exactly is the problem there, right? And we've even created some pejorative terms to describe some of these things, right? Oh, it's a lifestyle business, right? Well, I've got a startup. My friend Eric, he's got this lifestyle business that gives him a way better lifestyle than I have with my startup. But we talk about it like it's a problem, right? He's got a lifestyle business, right? Poor guy is stuck in a fantastic lifestyle. Oh God, I pity him, right? I don't know where the notion came from.
My favorite, Ryan, is VCs that call it a lifestyle business. I'm like, hold on, whoa. Back up. You guys raise $100 million. You guys are in the ultimate lifestyle business, right? Like, right. You guys raise $100 million. You're on the hook for 7 to 10 years at a fixed revenue rate off of that $100 million. Maybe you raise another fund, maybe you don't. isn't that a lifestyle business? And by the way, what's the probability you're in the top quartile of VCs that'll ever see a check, a distribution at the end of this? Probably zero. You're kind of, unless you're Mark Andreessen, you're kind of in no position to be talking about lifestyle businesses being in the ultimate lifestyle business as it is. I mean, but actually, let's stick with that. I don't ever want to vilify investors because they're a critical part of the startup ecosystem, but I do want to put in perspective where some of these bullshit narratives come from, right? The idea that I have to have a huge business is entirely driven by investors, okay? And you'll find tons of other content that we've written or talked about, which says that, look, if you're going to raise money, you need to have a huge total addressable market, a huge TAM. You have to. That's the whole point. If you're going to go to investors, that's not the same as saying you're supposed to have a big market or you shouldn't start a business. That's idiotic. And so I think over time, startup lore, the startup narrative, Ryan, has changed so that it's no longer just about being successful, making a profitable business. It now has to be a giant business to somehow have some sense for validation. And I just don't see who that's beneficial for at all, other than investors, maybe.
You're right. I mean, at this point, the narrative is driving the actions, right? And so people have bought into this concept now that it has to be big to be successful, and then that dictates a particular path. The tail is absolutely wagging the dog in this case, and quite unnecessarily so. People are out trying to figure out how they can get funding for businesses that probably don't need it, so that it can be bigger than it can ever possibly be. So therefore, it's not going to get funding anyways. That's the other thing we see. People keep running into these hurdles where it's like, well, we just can't seem to raise for this. The TAM's not big enough. The TAM's, well, then stop trying to raise money for it.
Or don't torture the business into something it's not.
Don't torture it. Don't torture it into something it's not, right? If the TAM isn't big enough to justify funding, you probably also don't need the funding to do a good job in that market. You can probably build a really good, healthy business, bootstrapping it and just doing it the way that businesses were built for a long time. I think that's the thing we forget is that like these crazy funding rounds and the amount of third-party capital plowed into businesses didn't always exist. In fact, a lot of the very big businesses that we now associate as these huge successful companies came up at a time where that wasn't possible. They didn't have the same level of equity available to them, and they still managed to build these massive blue chip companies, right? It's possible. Is it the same thing? Is it as fast? Is it as easy? I don't know. We never will.
If you drive down your main street and look at every restaurant or retail store, they probably didn't get there with angel and venture funding to begin with. Some of them, as they scale, they have private equity and things like that. Different ballgame. But yeah, the truth is 99% of businesses aren't taking on venture funding.
They certainly didn't.
That said, wherever you are in your career, and I don't think it matters if you're early in your career or late in your career, what you should be most concerned about, what we should all be most concerned about is, will it work? Will this thing actually work? Forget how big it might be. What's the highest probability that what I'm about to sink my cash, my time, my effort, and everything into will actually work? I mean, work being it's going to turn a profit, just to be clear. Work isn't that we can acquire lots of users with no revenue. Work is, do I have a viable business?
That doesn't count anymore?
No lack of dead bodies there. But I guess my point is, let's go back to the base hit concept, or the get on base first concept. If all you do is swing for home runs and never get on base, you'll always lose, right? Every now and then again, somebody becomes fortunate and they hit the right thing at the right time. But it's such a broken mechanic that we just see so many people going down in flames because they set themselves up for abject failure.
They put themselves into a binary condition of like maybe this massive outcome with a really tiny probability, or total failure with a massive probability. And like they put themselves on that path arbitrarily, right?
Correct.
By choice.
Correct.
They decided to do that, and it's not necessary.
Right. And so take our business, for example. It's not fair to say that we bootstrapped the business because we had our own capital to fund the business, right? It's not quite the same thing. Like, people think of bootstrapping as you've got, $5,000 in the bank and you grow it up from there. I mean, we had millions of dollars to work with, so to speak. And so that said, we've grown the business without taking on venture capital. And if we wanted to make it bigger, we have so many options available. That's the funny thing. Like, if all we want to do is scale the business, I could return the calls of 50 private equity companies or VCs right now, and we could go scale the business. And I'm not saying that like because we're something special. Anybody can, that gets to this level, right? It's not unique to how big our idea is. In fact, if you get to this level without having to raise capital, and I don't want to make this purely about raising capital, you have even more options because there's so many other ways you can get it done. But that's not really my point. My point is, if what we're trying to do in those formative stages, when picking the idea, when picking the market, and picking our path, which also, by the way, often includes whether we raise money or not, is purely based on the biggest possible outcome. And if that biggest possible outcome also comes at the cost of the lowest possible probability, and doesn't always, but just to be clear, it's broken. It's a dumb idea, or it's a dumb initial path. I would say, what does that idea look like to get to first base? I'll make up an example. Let's say that, Ryan, you and I were beating up the idea to do Airbnb. I would argue there's two very different paths for how we get started there. One is the idea is huge. It's a billion-dollar business. And we need to fund the hell out of it to kind of, to realize that goal in a speedy way. And obviously that happened, right? So I'm trying to use it in the extreme. The other could be, really Airbnb at the end of the day is a localized business. People in certain areas are renting their homes, et cetera. And so if we focused on the demand for housing and vacationing, let's say in certain areas first, and then built it out more organically, we could probably bootstrap it. It would only take a few of us to do it. And it would take a little more time, like business has been built for hundreds of years. But we could also probably get that done too. Here would be my argument, and Ryan, I'm very interested to hear yours. My argument would be, the business is a good idea, whether it's big or small. Let's go after whichever one we think has a higher probability of actually turning into something that's valuable to us.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
How would you evaluate it?
Well, yeah, in the same way. I mean, it's still to the diet analogy, right? You can't lose the 40th pound until you've lost the 39th, 38th, 37th, right? And so it has to work. Right. And again, if it doesn't work at a small scale, there are very, very few businesses outside of like large manufacturing plays and things like that where ubiquity is necessary to make something work, right? Like there's a reason you don't see like cell phone companies popping up on a per zip code basis, because the infrastructure required to do it doesn't make sense. Very, very few businesses that work in that way, and the rest of them, can be started as small as, look, Chesky started it by first the market was an extra couch they had in their apartment, right?
Right.
That's pretty localized, absolutely. Right? We built a business around what?
Yeah, absolutely. Drafting off Craigslist.
Our TAM is my couch. It's 3 cushions. My TAM is 3 cushions currently, right? And again, it already existed too. That was the other thing. Craigslist was already allowing couch surfing and subletting and all that stuff. So what they did was come in and say, hey, let's see if we can make this work on a separate platform, and then let's work to scale it, right? But it worked first, both by proxy, by seeing it work on Craigslist and word of mouth and wherever else people were doing couch surfing, and fractional usage of homes or full usage of homes. So it was already working by proxy, and then they continued to make it work. Starting out locally. We talk to so many entrepreneurs every year, and it's a conversation I have over and over and over again, where somebody's trying to figure out how to roll out to every market in the entire ever markets available to them at the same time. And I'm like, guys, pick one market, make it work there. Like, why do you think this has to happen nationwide or worldwide all at once? Make it work in a microcosm, and then make it work elsewhere, right? Because if it won't work there, it's not going to work globally.
Well, absolutely. And to your point, some ideas have to have scale. In other words, the idea itself doesn't work unless maybe you have a two-sided marketplace that has to have enough scale. And maybe Airbnb needed to be that. Maybe that needed to be funded. But my point is this. if you're evaluating the idea by saying the only way I'm going to optimize my approach here is $1 billion or bust, think of how unlikely it is that you'll ever get to that outcome, right? And look, as founders, we don't have that many shots on goal, right? If we're fortunate enough to start, let's say in our early 20s, and we get to start a couple more businesses along the way, awesome. But as we get a little bit older, late 20s, early 30s, etc., we have fewer and fewer opportunities to be able to swing like this. Now, one school of thought is going to be, well, if you only have a few opportunities, you better go for the biggest opportunity possible. To which I say, fuck that.
Yep.
I was like,
Yeah, 100%.
if I only have one opportunity, I want the most probable opportunity possible. I can always figure out how to make it bigger later. That's actually a really easy problem to figure out. What I can't do is unwind spending 7 years chasing some giant TAM because some investor told me to and wind up with nothing. Nothing is the worst outcome, not a big enough TAM.